Hi, and thanks for joining. Today I'd like to share some insights on hydrogen embrittlement of metallic alloys with you. Hydrogen is a key pillar of a sustainable economy, but it is also very detrimental to materials. Particularly, it can lead to very strong embrittlement of metallic materials, which is particularly for alloys such as steels, nickel alloys, but also for titanium and aluminum, a big challenge at the moment. The confusing or difficult challenge behind understanding the mechanisms of hydrogen embrittlement a little bit better have to do with the fact that there are many different mechanisms at play, and often it is not so easy to see how they act together to finally lead to material decay and damage. One mechanism is, for instance, the decohesion, when hydrogen accumulates on interfaces and lowers their cohesion, for instance across grain boundaries when they are decorated by hydrogen. Another aspect is the feature of local plasticity. It has been often observed that in hydrogen-loaded materials, dislocations can move at lower barriers and also seem to have some kind of stress shielding, which allows them accumulating closer together. Another mechanism is that hydrogen can lead to enhanced dislocation emission from sources. Furthermore, it was revealed that the presence of hydrogen can stabilize superabundant vacancies by both lowering their energy of formation but also their mobility. Very often, under certain boundary conditions, you also can find pore formation and pore growth, which is accelerated when hydrogen is present. In some materials, for instance, particularly in titanium, zirconium, hafnium, etc., you can also form hydrides, which then can lead to embrittlement themselves, because hydrides are often very brittle constituents in such alloys. Generally, there's also defactant theory valid behind alloys that are loaded by hydrogen, and that means that according to the classical Gibbs adsorption isotherm, the energy of certain interfaces or defects can be lowered when hydrogen is present, and that can have an effect also on embrittlement. In some alloys, it has been even argued or even shown that complexions can form. So these are interface stabilized phases that alter the behavior of the material when hydrogen is present. In many alloys that are close to phase transformations, such as certain nickel alloys or certain austenitic steels, the influence of the hydrogen on the stacking fault energy can play also a very big role, because it would obviously then alter the behavior of twin formation and of stacking faults. Generally, it must be appreciated that the presence of hydrogen is also altering thermodynamic equilibria, because hydrogen is, after all, an alloying element as any element elsewise in the periodic table, and hence the Gibbs free energy curves and their tie lines can be affected. So there are several other more mechanisms which are being discussed in the literature. And the real riddle or the real challenge for material scientists is to understand how all these different mechanisms act together to lead finally to the damage and often catastrophic failure of such materials. The reason why we want to study this in more detail and want to disentangle the activity and interplay of these different mechanisms is also, of course, to discover corresponding countermeasures to protect the materials from these respective hydrogen embrittlement mechanisms. Another very important aspect that makes research on hydrogen embrittlement so complicated is when you look at a schematic of the cosmos of microstructure and defects in complex metallic alloys, from the lattice defects to grain boundaries, to texture, to phases, to surfaces, and so on. You must understand that it is also the loading condition of hydrogen that makes this problem really challenging. When you consider a trapping landscape for hydrogen in such complex microstructure scenarios, then you can understand that the trapping landscape is very different, and trapping depths for hydrogen can be very diverse depending on the nature of the defect that is being affected by intruding hydrogen. And when you now compare that with the corresponding chemical potential level that is given when hydrogen is present, then it depends which of these traps are being filled and which of these traps are not being filled when we, for instance, have different scenarios where the chemical potential has a different value. That means aspects such as the temporal effects of hydrogen loading, whether it's a flash exposure like during welding process, for instance, or whether it's a permanent exposure like in pipeline problems, makes this reactant hydrogen embrittlement effect very, very different. So this must be taken into consideration. Very often also you would encounter gradients in the chemical potential of the hydrogen. That means you do not have any homogeneous hydrogen embrittlement in the material, but the profile of the chemical potential of the hydrogen can alter, for instance, from the surface to the center of the materials. That means you can have even scenarios where the hydrogen embrittlement effect at the surface differs from the hydrogen embrittlement effects deep inside of the material. So all these aspects must be taken into consideration, whether you, for instance, have to passivate the material, change the interfaces, use certain chemical variants, or whether you protect the materials in terms of using coatings, for instance. There are different ways to measure hydrogen in the material, because you must also consider that sometimes in the literature you see rather hand-waving suggestions where the hydrogen might actually be. And when you consider the microstructure landscape that I've shown you on the slide before, and also different traps that would host the hydrogen that has been intruding, then you must be able to first of all quantify how much hydrogen you really have in the material and where the hydrogen is located. The standard approach for doing so is, of course, the use of thermal desorption spectroscopy, TDS, in which you associate certain evaporation peaks during the desorption with certain trapping energies. But these peaks are often very broad and overlap and are not so easy to disentangle. And also you must consider that actually you need a certain theory behind it, because the hydrogen is not just going in and out to a specific trap, but it can go through a journey with multiple traps so that the total time when it leaves the material during desorption is quite complicated. So actually a proper interpretation of thermal desorption spectroscopy requires a certain theoretical understanding and analysis of what you should interpret and what you might not want to interpret. There are also very nice mesoscopic methods of revealing where the hydrogen is, for instance, leaving the material, such as direction with certain silver cyanides that lead to silver cyanide reduction and decoration of silver by the surface, and certain hydrogen-related microprinting techniques. These are very interesting methods because they allow you to show on a more microstructural scale where the hydrogen had been located, such as revealing hydrogen decoration of interfaces, for instance. When you go to a yet finer scale, you could also use a scanning Kelvin probe force microscopy, which can be calibrated to a very, very high sensitivity to show you at a local scale where hydrogen is leaving the sample. And when you go to yet finer scale, you can also recite to secondary ion mass spectrometry, to SIMS and nano-SIMS techniques, where you have a relatively high sensitivity, but these are now increasingly techniques where you might want to make sure that you load the material not with hydrogen but with deuterium, because in mass spectrometry the hydrogen can be easily confused with ambient hydrogen that you have in your measurement system. So, and furthermore, SIMS techniques are also affected by the ion secondary direction. That means you might want to repeat measurements by rotating samples about their normal directions, for instance. And at the near atomic scale, you can use atom probe tomography, but like with SIMS methods, it is advisable to use deuterium to make sure that the hydrogen that you measure is not acquired hydrogen from the chamber or from transport, but really the one that you used for charging. And there are, of course, a lot of separate papers that go deep into the details of these things. So this is just a little overview slide that shows you, similar like the picture we saw before, a relatively complex array of microstructure defects, as you see here, and the different areas where the hydrogen can now interplay with these different defects and lead to individual triggering of some of the mechanisms that we had on the second slide. And these are just a few microstructure examples from preceding papers where you see where, for instance, the hydrogen here is forming the help mechanism, where you have huge pileups with stress peaks and so on. Or here on this picture, you see massive porosity formation that you can see, for instance, sour gas environments when you use nickel or stainless steels. Or here you have the interplay of localized deformation and shear band formation plus decohesion across at the interfaces. Here you see classical decohesion, where the crack clearly follows the individual interfaces. Here you have an example from Atom Probe Tomography, where you see the formation of hydrides, for instance, and likewise here and here. And here you again have a classical decohesion phenomenon in a nickel-based superalloy. With that, I stop here and hope that these few slides make you sensitive how you should discuss the individual mechanisms and their interplay in the field of hydrogen embrittlement.